Hi, my name is Aaron. I'm a graphic artist. I teach at two junior colleges. During the summer, I teach children classes, and I use Adobe products for everything. But I think that schools should be using Affinity serif products at their schools. And why is that? Not only am I do I do use Adobe products for everything, I get access to it for free through my school. I also I'm an Adobe. Well, actually, it's expired, but at one point I was an Adobe certified expert in Photoshop. Currently, which is a lower level, I'm an Adobe certified professional in Photoshop and Illustrator. And I do that because I teach a class on how to pass the test. So I took those tests. Um, but I really think schools should consider switching to Affinity products. For several years now, I have recommended Affinity products to my students, which is it's not subscription based. It's a fee, and you can see right here. Right now, they have a big sale going on because they're responding to this big Adobe terms of service fiasco. They were recently acquired by Canva, so some people are a little bit nervous about whether or not they're going into the subscription mode. But right now, they are pay. You pay a one-time fee and you own the software. This is old school. You buy it, you own it. And I believe this company is based in Britain. But anyway, here we go. Right now it says 50% off everything. Again, this is in response to the Adobe fiasco because Adobe has upset a lot of people. Basically, in a nutshell, is Adobe is saying that they have I. It's quite convoluted, but they're basically saying that they may or may not use your images to train AI, and they have the right to go into the things that you have in the cloud. I don't know. But anyway, check that out. But right now here, this is about Affinity. Right now I'm going to click shop now. You can see right here $34. And this is Affinity Photo 2. They just upgraded recently, but Affinity Photo 2, and it's right now it's only $34.99. The regular price is $69.99, which I think is a steal. If you want to use Photoshop and you are a hobbyist, or you are a student and you cannot afford that monthly fee of Photoshop, which I believe the cheapest you can get is just one program, is it's either $10 or $20 a month, and for the whole suite, which is a lot of software. But if you're not using it, it's not worth it. But that's $59.99 per month. But anyway, this is cheap. This is $69.99. But right here, you can see it says Affinity Photo. That's the purple one, is the equivalent of Photoshop. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles as Photoshop. You definitely don't have the AI features. You don't have. No, actually, I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't. I've used this only a little bit, so I can't tell you the details. All I know is it is a worthy competitor for Photoshop, and the skills that you learn in editing photos and photo manipulation and making art within Affinity is comparable to the Adobe Photoshop. Okay, and then they have something here called Affinity Designer, which is the equivalent of Adobe Illustrator. And then there is Affinity Publisher, quite close to Adobe InDesign. During the pandemic and even now, when I start out a semester, inevitably one or two of my students are not going to have access to Adobe, the Adobe products. And then they have to contact IT and go through all of that. And hopefully they'll get reinstated within a couple of days, but sometimes it could be a couple of weeks. So it's a pain in the butt. And now Affinity is offering this free to schools. You see here, you can put in an application, but how to access Affinity for free as a teacher, school, or a nonprofit. Recently, Canva acquired Affinity, and Many of the users are worried that it may go to a subscription, and they have made pledges where they say they're not going to do that. I mean, things often change, over the years. People need to make money, and the easy way for them to make money is a subscription. It's just a perpetual supply of money. Whereas when you buy it, it is harder to continue to develop and that sort of thing. But they have pledged to keep it like this. I have students that say that they're going to pirate Adobe products just because it's so expensive. And I understand that, but Affinity is so cheap. There's no reason to pirate Photoshop. And then you will still get updates until they move on to the next version of it. And when they move on to the next version, you still maintain possession of that. And I know a lot of students or people that still are using Adobe CS6 back before they went to this subscription only model. And that is really old, whereas Affinity is up to date. So I recommend getting it. Again, I haven't used it much because I need to use Adobe products as I teach, because that is what the schools want me to use, because it is the industry standard. But I think there is going to be a bit of a shift right now, because Adobe possibly using people's work without their permission. Well, I guess they have their permission because they signed the terms of agreement. Because of that, they're really upsetting a lot of people. Actually, I recently saw something, I missed it. And there's this ad, which I could not believe. They said it's an in-program ad, but it says generate background and skip the photo shoot with generate background. This is AI. Now, if you think about it, this is AI is being trained off of the photographs of all of its stock photographers. So basically, they're telling them that you don't need the stock photographers anymore, because you can use this to generate it. Photoshop was initially primarily a tool for photographers. That is how this software started. Now they're telling people you don't really need the photographer. They really upset a lot of people. So a lot of people are jumping ship. And a lot of people are purchasing Affinity products. And again, the price is a steal. Again, this is a sale price, but at $70 for each of these software, or $164 for all three of them. It's so cheap. You own it. You can put that on your computer and use it until it is no longer compatible with your computer. Or if you want to not upgrade your computer and keep using it in perpetuity, you can. It's just a wonderful package. And getting back to the school thing. All right, so one of the things is Canva is sort of this online thing. You can use it free or you can subscribe, and it's a way that you can create things, and I use it myself. I use it for thumbnails for my classes and YouTube. And it's also you can make postcards and videos, and it's targeted for the non-designers, for people who work for nonprofits. I remember once I did a presentation for a nonprofit, and they wanted to learn about Canva. And again, because it makes a person who is not a designer a designer, and I highly recommend it. But at the same time, I personally sometimes do find it a bit clunky. It's like working in Microsoft Word. For me, it's not the most intuitive. I prefer a tool like Photoshop or Affinity. And now that they are giving this to schools, it's a no-brainer. Think about it. Schools are, enrollment is down. So right now, enrollment is down in higher education, and they're looking to make budget cuts. What better way to save money than to use the Affinity products in your school? Whereas Adobe, you got to pay. I do not know how much they pay to give students and teachers access, but it's costing them money. So I think if they switch to Affinity, the next generation of of graphic artists are going to be using Affinity and Adobe. Maybe one day one of them will rise to the top, but for right now, I think this is Affinity's chance to really take a bit of the market. And again, when I teach the classes during the summer, I teach children, high school age and down to about 6 years old. And one of the biggest problems that I have and is the school wants to teach with the industry standard software. My problem with that is probably 95% of the students will not have access to the Adobe products once the class is over. Actually, they only have access to it when they're in the classroom. When they go home, they can't go home and pop open that software and keep working unless their parents are willing to fork over the money, or actually or their parents actually have a subscription. So most of the students don't have access, and if you give them Affinity, they will have access. I think it's great that the schools want the students to learn with the industry standard software, but at the same time, I always push to use free software for my summer classes, because at the end of the day, when they go home, they don't have access to the Photoshop. They don't have access to the Adobe products. But if you give them a software that is free, they can use it, or even reasonably priced. But I know if I was a parent and I brought my kid to this class and they're still not sure what they want to do, I am not going to pay $20 a month in perpetuity for them to get access to Photoshop when they just may be playing around with it here and there. Whereas if it's something a reasonably priced software or free, it doesn't matter. I buy it, they have it, they can play around with it, they can stop, they can come back to it later, and it's still, they will have access to the software. So personally, I haven't used Affinity that products that much. I purchased a copy of version 1, which I had for several years, and I only used it occasionally. I actually bought it after a bad experience with Adobe, where I had the software on my laptop and I went to do a presentation, and when I went to open up the software, it didn't work because I didn't have an internet connection. And it really upset me. So I was thinking back, so theoretically, if something happened in my area and I lose my internet connection, I can potentially lose access to my Adobe software that I'm paying for. Whereas something like Affinity, I bought it, I own it, and I can use it as much as I want. I never have to go online if I never want to go online. As a professional, I think most work, you can still do most work that you need to do with Affinity. Um, the only thing is, if you're working with a team, there might be some times where you might it might be better to work with the same software. One of the nice things about Adobe products is it has these built-in fonts, but that's going back to one of the things that I don't like about Adobe is they've gone around and they keep buying up all of these uh, these other companies in software, so that you are fully reliant upon them, so you can't move around, so you can't easily move around. One of the things I remember a few years ago, there were these things called Kyle brushes. He's an artist, he's an illustrator, and he creates all these digital paint brushes. And they acquired Kyle. From what I heard, they bought all the rights to all of his brushes. So his brushes used to be out there for the world to see, and they just disappeared. And then they all appeared on Adobe. And Kyle became a spokesperson for the Adobe products. And make sure you look for some of his tutorials. They're great, where he talks about the brushes and how to use them. And but what they did was those brushes. If you'd purchased them before, you own them. You got to keep them. But then Adobe bought them and they disappeared from the market. So Adobe made another reason that you would be forced into this Adobe ecosystem. There's the now they snagged up all the fonts, which again is great. You don't have to buy the fonts. It's amazing. But you all brought into this ecosystem where everything you need is here, and they make it difficult to go outside to get those things. So there will be some drawbacks. You won't have access to all those brushes, you won't have access to all those fonts, but I personally think it is worth it. When Adobe started introducing all of these AI things, which makes things so much easier to do. I have a photo retouching assignment where it's fairly manual work and it takes time to fix this photograph, this highly damaged photograph. But now with this AI, these neural filters, it is very easy to very quickly fix something like that. But the problem that I see is students always want to take, well, not that's not true. Students often want to take the easy way out. And so do, us, so do professionals. The easy way is often the faster way. But it's at the expense of not learning to use the software properly and to dig in and really know how something works. Once you know how it works, then using these AI features, it makes sense to me. I think you need that foundation of doing things manually before you move into using the AI, because right now it's not perfect. One day it will be. So maybe one day this all is just a moot point. But as it stands right now, I think the students need that foundation. And Affinity doesn't have all the bells and whistles that makes everything so easy. So they will learn more. They will be able to figure things out. They'll have more problem solving skills rather than just throwing their information into the system and getting a perfect image out. They'll have to figure out how to make something work. They'll understand the software a bit more. And Adobe does this thing that I consider a bit of a predatory practice. Sometimes I'll have students at the college where they'll have trouble getting into Adobe. They'll into, say, Photoshop or Illustrator. They can't get in. Somehow the license that they gave them, the school gave them, isn't working, and they have to get it figured out. So in the meantime, the student decides, well, I'll just go get a trial. But unbeknownst to them, the trial suggests that they get they ask for a credit card number in order to get the trial. So I always tell my students, never ever give Adobe your credit card number, not unless you plan on going in and just buying the service. Do not give them your credit card number. And the reason is because, say they'll go in and they'll do the trial. If they don't cancel that trial at the end of, I don't know if it's 7 days, if they don't go in and manually cancel it, they get locked into a monthly subscription. Okay. Now the other thing is sometimes the students will say, well, I'm okay paying a month or two while this until I get this stuff from the school. It's not that expensive. But what happens is, as if you take that student discount, you have to read the fine print. What Adobe will do is they will give you this wonderful student discount, or as I heard someone recently say, this generous student discount, but they make it it's kind of not the easiest to understand that what you're signing up for is an annual agreement at a monthly fee. Okay, so they'll bill you monthly for an annual agreement, and if you cancel early, they'll stick it to you with an early termination fee. And I just think that is not the way you should be treating students, not the way you should be treating young people that you want to bring into your ecosystem and have them there for life. You don't bring them in with such predatory practices. So again, I don't know where Affinity is going, but now they have the backing of Canva, so I think they can ramp things up and get just as powerful, make software that is just as good as Adobe in most ways. And in some ways, I've heard people say that the Affinity products has some things that they do better. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens as Affinity products makes its way into our schools. And I'm very interested to see how the teachers embrace it. I know that I will be pushing for Affinity, and I know that I will be learning how to use this software because I think that they are a a good alternative to Photoshop. I will be ramping up my skills with Affinity products because I think they are a good alternative to Adobe products. They'll be cheaper for the schools. They'll be more accessible to the students. Or maybe even they will have a course where you'll switch off, teach more than one program. Or possibly maybe they can have a course where you will show them both, use both software, give them the choice. I certainly know that I will be doing that. I have to teach them Photoshop, but in my classes, I will absolutely be bringing in Affinity products now that it's free to the students. If when the semester ends, they're stuck. They have no other access to the software. Their learning stops unless they want to pay. Now, with Affinity products, that learning can continue through the summer months and it won't cost them a dime. And when this is all over, who do you think they're going to be more loyal to? They will get more comfortable using this software. They'll develop a brand loyalty to this software. And I think that makes Affinity a strong contender to becoming the next industry standard.